Chapter 2584 Arrival of the Yin River Celestial King. Chapter 2584 Arrival of the Yin River Celestial King. The Regulation of Space. Ling Han was slightly astonished. When Yuan had unsheathed his sword, a peculiar fluctuation had rippled across space. This was a sign of him wielding the regulations of space. It was also because of this that his thrust was so astonishingly quick. The sound of him unsheathing his sword had only just traveled over, yet the tip of his blade had already made contact with Ling Han's clothes. His mastery of the regulations of space was truly impressive. Otherwise, his thrust couldn't possibly have been so quick. Ling Han smiled faintly as he also wielded the regulations of space. An eerie scene appeared. Even though Yuan continued to advance, with his sword continuing to thrust forth, he was unable to strike Ling Han no matter what. It was as if this mere half an inch had suddenly become an insurmountable distance. Yuan frowned upon seeing this. He naturally realized what was going on. Ling Han was also using the regulations of space to oppose him. After reaching the Celestial King tier, what they used to do battle was none other than regulations. This was especially the case when both sides wielded the same regulations. In that case, the person who had more mastery over the regulations would gain an advantage. Was his mastery inferior to Ling Han's? Utterly impossible. He was a supreme monarch star. At the same cultivation level, who could suppress him? Freeze. With a wave of his left hand, he attempted to forcefully freeze space and trap Ling Han. Ling Han grinned and said, "I can shatter all regulations with my raw strength, and you still want to freeze me?" Peng. He punched at the air, and the space around him instantly shattered like glass. How could the regulations of space possibly trap him? One had to realize that Ling Han's body art was already powerful enough to face ordinary seventh heaven celestial kings head-on. As such, how could regulations at the fourth heaven trap him? Even supreme monarch stars couldn't succeed. Unleash your full strength. Otherwise, you'll be killed within 10 strikes, Ling Han said. He was brimming with confidence. Yuan remained silent. However, he immediately brandished his sword and created a strange symbol. A devastating aura instantly emanated from his body, and it was as if a primordial beast had awoken and was roaring in rage. Whoosh! He unleashed a completely different sword technique, and his slash was so powerful that it was as if heaven and earth were about to lose their luster. Ling Han stepped back in retreat. Yuan's battle prowess was far too terrifying at this moment. If Ling Han didn't unleash his full strength, it would truly be a struggle to deal with him. However, he still wanted to witness the might of this sword technique, so he merely retreated and allowed Yuan to continue with his attacks. "Hurry up and capture him," Lu Li shouted. He instantly regained his confidence after seeing Yuan gain the upper hand. "Leave," Yuan said coldly. Others didn't know, but he was extremely aware that Ling Han's battle prowess was superior to his. Right now, he could only suppress Ling Han because he had activated a secret technique, allowing his battle prowess to increase threefold. However, this wouldn't last for long. Moreover, it was clearly impossible for him to suppress and capture Ling Han in such a short amount of time. Thus, the only thing he could do was obstruct Ling Han. What? Lu Li was deeply astonished. He was extremely confident in Yuan as this was someone who could achieve victory even when he was at a disadvantage in terms of cultivation level. This was to say nothing about opponents at the same cultivation level. Now, however, Yuan was actually telling him to leave. What did this signify? This signified that Yuan lacked the confidence to defeat Ling Han. It was because of this that he was telling him to leave. Gasp! Even though Lu Li felt extremely displeased, he trusted Yuan's judgment without reservations. This person didn't speak much, and he was definitely someone whose actions spoke louder than his words. Since he felt like he was weaker than Ling Han, this definitely wasn't a case of him being humble. Instead, he was truly inferior to Ling Han. Lu Li immediately turned around to leave. Moreover, he was running instead of walking. If even Yuan couldn't stop Ling Han, then he could only seek his father for help. Or he could seek out that other person who was even more powerful than his father. Tang Yuan saw all of this, and a cold smile involuntarily appeared on his face. Wasn't Lu Li extremely mighty? Yet, he was still scared off by his underling. Ling Han humphed as he dashed toward Lu Li like lightning. Stay here. Yuan roared. Wielding the regulations of space, his speed was also immense as he thrust at Ling Han's back. Ling Han furrowed his brows. Yuan was extremely powerful, especially after he had activated some kind of secret technique. This caused his battle prowess to become even more powerful, so much so that even Ling Han didn't dare to face this attack head-on. He abandoned his pursuit of Lu Li, instead turning around to throw a punch at Yuan's sword. Boom! His fist struck the tip of the blade, unleashing a devastating shock wave that instantly slammed the nearby people to the ground. However, Lu Li had been the first to flee, so he wasn't hit by this shockwave. He started to flee even quicker. No matter what, he was also a Celestial King, second heaven Celestial King at that. Thus, if he decided to flee, even fifth heaven Celestial Kings wouldn't be able to catch him. Your opponent is me, Yuan shouted in a cold voice. Ling Han shook his head, saying, however, it's a shame that you're no match for me. I possess a peerless sword heart that can sever all matter, Yuan said. His voice was calm, and his fighting spirit wasn't affected in the least. Ling Han roared with laughter, saying, all right then, let us have a hearty battle. He unleashed his full strength, drawing on the great Tao with his hands. He then activated his body art, causing his battle prowess to directly soar to the seventh heaven. Regardless of how powerful Yuan was, he was still limited by his aptitude as a supreme monarch star. Even though he had activated a secret technique to increase his battle prowess, how could this possibly rival Ling Han's body art? He was suppressed in all facets, instantly falling to a disadvantage. Tang Yuan and the others were all shocked upon seeing this. They hurriedly turned around to flee. Even Lu Li had fled, so it was clear that the situation had already spiraled out of control. That being the case, why would they stay here to seek death? Ling Han's fighting spirit was also excited, and he threw both of his fists forward. There was only battle on his mind. Peng! In just a dozen or so punches, Yuan was struck and sent flying. Only after shattering 3 large boulders did he come to a stop. Even though he couldn't pick himself up no matter how he tried, his right hand still tightly gripped the hilt of his sword, not loosening in the slightest. Ling Han leaped up, dashing toward Tang Yuan. Since they had already fallen out, he would bring on bloodshed. He was far too quick, and he had only given chase a little after Tang Yuan had started fleeing. Activating the regulations of space, he rapidly closed in on Tang Yuan. Tang Yuan looked back, and his face immediately became green with fear. He hurriedly fled with all his might. However, with 3 quick flashes, Ling Han had already arrived behind Tang Yuan. He unleashed a single punch. Humph! Following a cold humph, a terrifying force slammed toward Ling Han, triggering the regulations of heaven and earth as it did so. This force transformed into a colossal palm that viciously thrust toward Ling Han. Apprehension instantly gripped Ling Han's heart. With a quick turn, he managed to successfully evade this strike. However, the devastating wind whipped up by this strike caused his clothes to flutter and his flesh to hurt. This was a formidably powerful person. Ling Han turned around, only to see a young man standing behind him. He was dressed in a grey robe that was decorated with a flowing river. Looking closely, however, he realized that this river was actually flowing in a tumultuous manner and radiating with an eerie aura. Most importantly, this person actually had 7 ribbons of iridescent light around him. A 7th heaven Celestial King. Lord Yin River, Tang Yuan exclaimed. After escaping from the clutches of death, he couldn't help but feel boundless delight. Lord Yin River? This person was the Azure Ghost Celestial King's disciple, the Yin River Celestial King. The Yin River Celestial King wore a look of disdain as he glanced at Ling Han, saying, after seeing me, you're still not going to surrender. Ling Han smiled faintly. Judging from his attack, this Yin River Celestial King was no ordinary 7th heaven Celestial King. Instead, he was a monarch tier. This signified that his battle prowess was infinitesimally close to the 8th heaven. It was no wonder that his attack had been so devastating. If I want to kill someone, even you can't stop me, Ling Han said. Chapter 2585, Forcefully Killed. Chapter 2585, Forcefully Killed. The Yin River Celestial King couldn't help but laugh. A measly fourth heaven Celestial King actually dared to act so audaciously before him? He shook his head, saying, "Li Long, where in the world is your confidence coming from?" Ling Han didn't reply. Instead, his gaze was boiling with killing intent as it remained focused on Tang Yuan. This person actually dared to screw him over. He naturally had to pay a price for this. Tang Yuan continued to retreat. Ling Han's gaze was far too terrifying, so much so that it caused a cold chill to rise from the bottom of his heart. The Yin River Celestial King humphed, and said, "Why are you retreating? With me here, can he hurt a single hair of yours?" Tang Yuan was placed in an extremely awkward situation. On the one hand, he was extremely afraid of Ling Han. On the other hand, however, the Yin River Celestial King was the disciple of the Azure Ghost Celestial King. Moreover, because the Azure Ghost Celestial King didn't have any children, the Yin River Celestial King was much like a son to him. He was dearly loved by the Azure Ghost Celestial King. Thus, did Tang Yuan dare to disobey him? If he didn't give him face, he would definitely suffer a miserable fate. He mustered all of his courage and forced himself to stop. However, he couldn't stop himself from shaking in fear. His legs felt like jelly. Ling Han cracked a grin, saying to the Yin River Celestial King, "Do you want to make a bet? I can definitely kill this person." Impudence, the Yin River Celestial King roared. He was a mighty seventh heaven Celestial King, yet Ling Han actually dared to act with such blatant disregard before him? This was unacceptable. "Just wait and see," Ling Han said. If he unleashed his full battle prowess and summoned his divine demon sword, it most likely wouldn't be a difficult task to rival the Yin River Celestial King. Moreover, Tang Yuan was far from the seventh heaven, so killing him wouldn't be too difficult, either. "Capture him," the Yin River Celestial King roared. He lashed out again, extending his right hand. Hua, hua, hua. Several black rivers materialized, appearing much like black dragons as they slithered toward Ling Han. Without a word, Ling Han immediately summoned his divine demon sword. His battle prowess could only rival ordinary seventh heaven celestial kings. However, he definitely couldn't rival monarch tiers at the peak stage of the seventh heaven. Thus, refusing to use the divine demon sword would be akin to torturing himself. "Celestial tool," the Yin River Celestial King exclaimed, involuntarily furrowing his brows. He hadn't been aware that Ling Han also possessed a celestial tool. Even though Ling Han had used the divine demon sword in the Tournament of Death before, he had only used it for a split second before sheathing it again. He hadn't exposed its true power. Moreover, it was only after receiving Lu Li's calls for reinforcements that the Yin River Celestial King had hurriedly rushed over. He hadn't had the time to do any research on Ling Han. As such, the appearance of the divine demon sword truly gave him a start. To celestial kings, possessing or not possessing a celestial tools were two completely different concepts. Before a celestial tool's might, even the Yin River Celestial King had to be extremely wary and careful. He had to dodge the divine demon sword's razor-sharp attacks. Otherwise, he would suffer an additional wound every time he was struck. If his vitals were struck, he would more so be sent into the afterlife. Ling Han cracked a grin, saying, "You're not going to flee?" His words were aimed at Tang Yuan. Tang Yuan faltered upon hearing this. Judging from the situation, the Yin River Celestial King was completely unable to suppress Ling Han. Thus, if Tang Yuan remained, wouldn't he be seeking death? However, the Yin River Celestial King had already told him to stop fleeing. If he disobeyed and didn't give him face? What a difficult situation. The Yin River Celestial King's expression darkened. Just then, he had confidently proclaimed that he could suppress Ling Han with ease. To his surprise, however, his opponent was actually this terrifying. Even if it were a freak with an evolution index of 12, they would only be able to rival the sixth heaven while at the fourth heaven, right? Just what kind of freak was this? However, this was inevitable. Who would imagine that Ling Han could actually extract void particle energy to temper his physique, causing his body art to far surpass his cultivation level? Add to that the divine demon sword, and he could even rival monarch tears at the 7th heaven. The Yin River Celestial King had to concede that even though Ling Han couldn't defeat him, he couldn't suppress Ling Han, either. "Piss off," he roared in frustration and embarrassment. Tang Yuan instantly heeded this delightful command, hurriedly turning around to flee. He had lost his face long ago, so he naturally didn't give a toss about fleeing before everyone. Ling Han waved his hand, instantly throwing forth a figure. "Go, kill him." This was none other than Little Terror. This little guy possessed the highest cultivation level among Ling Han and the others. Right now, it had already reached the 6th heaven. Add to that the fact that he was a monster created by a dimension, and his battle prowess was naturally above his cultivation level as well. Otherwise, how could it live up to its name as a battle beast? Boom! It charged forward, catching up to Tang Yuan in just a few steps. It then widened its maws to chomp down at Tang Yuan. Its mouth instantly grew hundreds of times larger, and it was as if it were a mountain as it swallowed Tang Yuan with a gulp. Little Terror's mouth then immediately shrunk again. It smacked its lips as if it were enjoying the aftertaste. The Yin River Celestial King was absolutely stupefied. No matter what, he hadn't imagined that Ling Han had a Celestial King tier great beast hidden on him. The adjective great wasn't based on size. Instead, it was based on cultivation level. This beast had already become a Celestial King, so it was naturally a great beast. "Little Terror, come, let's dispose of this person now," Ling Han said with a smile. Little Terror immediately plodded over, its large eyes filled with killing intent as it glared at the Yin River Celestial King. Ling Han spread his hands, saying, "I already told you. If I want to kill someone, I'll definitely succeed." The Yin River Celestial King forcefully suppressed his boiling rage. He then took a deep breath before saying, "Then are you going to kill me as well?" "Definitely, just not right now," Ling Han replied with a smile. The Yin River Celestial King raised a brow. This person was truly audacious, even wanting to kill him. "Oh, then when are you going to act?" "That will give me some time to prepare as well, no? When I reach the 5th heaven or 6th heaven." "You won't have to wait for too long," Ling Han replied. The Yin River Celestial King roared with laughter. "You still want to reach the 5th heaven or 6th heaven? What an absolute joke. You'll die here today." Ling Han smiled faintly, saying, "Rest assured, I'll leave before the 9th heaven Celestial Kings receive news of this. There's no need for you to worry. Moreover, I'll also return from time to time, killing those I dislike." The Yin River Celestial King exploded with rage upon hearing this. Ling Han's words implied that the Yin River couldn't stop him at all. Moreover, Ling Han would still sneak back into Ghost King City from time to time, killing people such as Lu Li and the others, including even him. "Can you truly leave?" he said coldly. If a 4th heaven Celestial King managed to calmly leave Ghost King City after wantonly killing someone, would the Yin River Celestial King still have any face in the future? After escaping, young masters such as Zhao Shuang would definitely report the situation to their own fathers. Thus, 9th heaven Celestial Kings would definitely arrive here very soon. At that time, Ling Han's fate would be set in stone. Ling Han and Little Terror teamed up as they attacked the Yin River Celestial King. Both of them possessed battle prowess at the 7th heaven, so they naturally gained an upper hand after teaming up. However, their advantage wasn't significant. After all, the Yin River Celestial King's battle prowess was already approaching the 8th heaven. After battling for a while, Ling Han resolutely said, "Little Terror, let's go." Little Terror growled in acknowledgement. The person and beast immediately ignored the Yin River Celestial King as they fled from the city. The Yin River Celestial King humphed as he gave chase. How could he allow Ling Han to flee? He was indeed slightly quicker than Ling Han and Little Terror. However, he didn't dare to get too close to them. After all, he had to dodge the attacks from the divine demon sword. Thus, he could only attack from a distance and cause some obstructions for Ling Han. This indeed created some troubles for Ling Han and Little Terror as they fled. However, it wasn't anything serious, and they quickly approached the city gates after just 30 minutes. Yet, it was also at this moment that they heard a cold humph. A colossal hand reached over from the city, rapidly grabbing at Ling Han. The radiance of the great Tao flashed, exuding a paramount aura. This was the act of a ninth heaven celestial king. Chapter 2586, Hunted by Ninth Heaven Celestial Kings. Chapter 2586, Hunted by Ninth Heaven Celestial Kings. A ninth heaven celestial king lashed out, grabbing at Ling Han. Ling Han was extremely powerful and freakish, yet he was still no match for ninth heaven celestial kings as a fourth heaven celestial king. Each subsequent heaven was a completely different level. Right now, he could already challenge those three heavens above him, but this naturally couldn't be extended without limits. Fortunately, he had already prepared for this moment long ago. The instant that the colossal hand appeared, he had already grabbed Little Terror and tossed him into his spatial celestial tool. He then stepped forward, activating his teleportation skills. With a flash, he had already appeared in the distance. Peng! The colossal hand missed its target. However, it still flattened numerous houses, killing many who weren't even aware of what was going on. Some celestial kings were fortunate enough to survive, only suffering severe wounds. They groaned as they lay in the ruins, their faces filled with confusion. Just whom had they provoked to bring down such a harsh punishment? This was the Celestial King graveyard, where elites could act as they pleased. Humph! There was a cold humph as the ninth heaven Celestial King attacked again. Another colossal hand appeared, casting a shadow over the entire Ghost King city. Could Ling Han still escape? This was naturally impossible. A ninth heaven Celestial King had already lashed out and more so locked his divine sense onto him. Ling Han was indeed quick, yet he was definitely not quicker than a ninth heaven Celestial King. Thus, with a twist, Ling Han immediately descended to the ground. Upon landing, he immediately activated the heaven deceiving technique, instantly transforming his appearance and aura. It was as if he had become a completely different person. He quickly mingled together with the crowd of shivering people. They were all terrified by the grand might of the ninth heaven Celestial King. This was inside the city, where the terrain was extremely complicated. Thus, Ling Han could hide in any random building. The ninth heaven Celestial King didn't slam his hand down. After all, his colossal hand was covering the entire Ghost King city this time, so if he truly slammed it down, he would kill at least 90% of the residents. Even he couldn't endure such a heavy loss. In reality, most wealth was created by ordinary people. Here, moreover, the lower-level celestial kings were also involved in another big secret. He couldn't massacre them as he pleased. Whoosh! A figure strode over in the sky, his body surrounded by 9 ribbons of iridescent light. He was none other than Lu Gaochuan, Lu Li's father. After Lu Li had fled back to him, he had immediately used his divine sense to scan the entire city, quickly discovering Ling Han. He had then wanted to immediately lash out to capture Ling Han. However, because of the great distance, he was ultimately unable to unleash his full might. It was because of this that Ling Han had managed to dodge his attack. Otherwise, how could a measly 4th heaven celestial king dodge the attack of a 9th heaven celestial king? Lu Gaochuan stood with his hands behind his back as he scoured every inch of dirt. He was intent on capturing Ling Han. "My respects to Lord Lu," the Yin River Celestial King said and clasped his hands as he flew over. He was the disciple of the Azure Ghost Celestial King, and he was also a 7th heaven Celestial King to begin with, so he didn't need to show too much respect and fear before Lu Gaochuan. Lu Gaochuan nodded, and said, "Where did this young man come from? He was actually able to evade my attack. He's called Li Long, and he is a traitorous disciple from the world's paramount martial academy," the Yin River Celestial King replied. Not long ago, he displayed his brilliant battle prowess at the Tournament of Death. This was all the information he had. Lu Gaochuan was astonished, saying, "You already rushed over, yet you still couldn't capture him?" He wasn't demeaning the Yin River Celestial King. Instead, he was genuinely astounded. A monarch tier at the 7th heaven had actually failed to capture a 4th heaven Celestial King? Who could believe this? People would become his followers, so he could naturally build his own force. However, ordinary people could only rely on themselves and treat everyone else as an enemy. They wouldn't make any contact with other people. Thus, only a measly few dozen people confirmed the identities of each other. Meanwhile, the large majority of people remained silent and unmoving. Fuck. Tang Mingbo almost swore in frustration. This was his brilliant plan, yet it had proven to be a foolish endeavor in the end. He was just about to speak, yet his expression suddenly faltered. A cold smile spread across his face, and he said, "I told everyone to come out just then. Haha. Did you think I wouldn't discover you if you hid?" He ferociously grabbed at a building. Chapter 2587, Fool. Chapter 2587, Fool. Tang Mingbo naturally didn't believe that Ling Han would obediently hand himself over. Thus, he had continued to use his divine sense to scan the surrounding area, determining whether anyone remained hiding in the houses or inside a spatial god tool. Just then, he had discovered an extremely faint fluctuation. This was the fluctuation of a spatial god tool. With his cultivation as a ninth heaven celestial king, he could already enjoy an equal status with the great Tao, so just how sensitive was his divine sense? He immediately determined that there was a living being inside this spatial god tool. Thus, he resolutely concluded that Ling Han was hiding inside. He immediately attacked without any reservations. Peng! Just as his large hand was about to grab the house, there was a deafening rumble as the house self-destructed first. A large black hand reached out, blocking Tang Mingbo's hand. The owner of this hand was definitely extremely powerful, with his strike directly shattering Tang Mingbo's large hand. Heh. Lu Gaochuan and the others had all been absent-minded just then, yet at this moment, they all wore surprised expressions. In fact, they were slightly astounded. The ability to block Tang Mingbo's strike proved that this person was definitely no weaker than him. This definitely wasn't Ling Han. "Friend, who are you? Why are you hiding?" Lu Gaochuan shouted. Do you people insist on forcing me out?" an old voice replied. An elder with a hunched back slowly trod upon space as he walked into the air. This person was truly very old, with his back so hunched that he looked like a shrimp. There was a cane in his hand, and all of his hair had already become white. There was no ribbon of iridescent light around him, and it was clear that he had purposefully suppressed his aura. However, upon seeing this elder, Lu Gaochuan and the others all inhaled a sharp breath, wearing expressions of utter shock. "Zhong Feiyu," they exclaimed in unison. Zhong Feiyu was an old-generation celestial king who had already reached the ninth heaven long ago. Moreover, he wasn't a resident of Ghost King City, and he was instead the most powerful subordinate of prosperous Opening City's city lord. His status was equivalent to that of Ghost King City's Yang Q. More importantly, prosperous Opening City was at odds with Ghost King City, with both sides yearning to defeat and conquer the other. In the Celestial King graveyard, even though human life was worthless, it was also the most valuable resource at the same time. Right now, a pillar of the opposing force had secretly hidden inside Ghost King City. What were they planning to do? Hang on. Why had Ling Han fled here? Oh, indeed. Ling Han was definitely a member of prosperous Opening City. He had been sent here, though it was unclear what his exact aim was. In any case, he had caused a huge commotion, so he had fled here to seek help from Zhong Feiyu. What an utter fool. He had exposed Zhong Feiyu just like that. Otherwise, it was truly hard to say when they would have discovered Zhong Feiyu's existence. At that time, perhaps he would have already succeeded in his plan and caused catastrophic damage. After all, he was the second most influential person in prosperous Opening City, so could his scheme be small? This being the case, they truly needed to thank Ling Han. They needed to thank this utter fool. They were sure that Ling Han was definitely hiding in Zhong Feiyu's spatial god tool at this moment. Thus, as long as they could capture Zhong Feiyu, they could also capture Ling Han. Meanwhile, Ling Han also wore an expression of shock as he stood among the crowd of people. He had chosen a random direction to flee in, yet he had actually dragged another ninth heaven celestial king into this mess. Moreover, this person seemed extremely freakish. Sure enough, Ling Han was a big troublemaker. He could drag people into trouble no matter where he went. His ability was as powerful as could be. He secretly stepped back in retreat. Even if he stayed to watch the show, he would need to watch from a safe distance. After all, a battle between ninth heaven celestial kings would be far too terrifying. Even the shock waves from their battle would be devastating and fatal. Right now, Jean Feiyu was definitely the most frustrated person. In fact, he had already hidden here for several years, not coming across a single hitch. So, what in the world had gone wrong? Why had he been exposed? Moreover, judging from Lu Gaochuan and the others' expressions, they seemingly hadn't known about this, either. They had only found him by accident. He had truly suffered great misfortune. Which bastard had dragged him into their mess? His meticulous plan was now at risk of evaporating into smoke. This infuriated him greatly. If he found out who the culprit was, he would definitely hack them to death. No, hacking them to death wouldn't be enough. He would severely wound them, and then heal them to full health. He would then repeat this again and again several hundred times before killing them. Jean Feiyu suppressed his frustration and anger before saying, "Since I've been exposed, I'll take my leave now. I'll also give you all a warning. Following Azure Ghost will only lead to a bad fate. It's better for you to surrender to prosperous opening city, where we can take part in a magnificent cause together." He decided to leave, yet he still didn't forget to sling some mud at the Azure Ghost Celestial King. Even if this was futile, he could still mess with their minds a little. "Jean Feiyu, can you escape?" Tang Mingbo said in a baleful voice. The culprit who had killed his son was hiding inside this person's spatial god tool. Moreover, he involuntarily thought of many more things at this moment. Perhaps it had all been a scheme of prosperous opening city. Perhaps they had purposefully targeted his son. He had to avenge his son. Jean Feiyu truly wanted to curse. Tang Mingbo's glare was far too piercing and ferocious. It was as if he had killed his father or son. What in the fuck was this? Even if he were expressing loyalty toward Azure Ghost, there was no need for his act to be so serious, right? He humphed, and said, "If Azure Ghost doesn't come out, who can stop me?" He was a monarch tier, so he was much more powerful than ordinary ninth heaven celestial kings. In reality, Lu Gaochuan, Tang Mingbo, and the others were all emperor tiers. If it weren't for the environment of the celestial king graveyard, perhaps they might have been stuck at the first heaven for their entire lives. Of course, in the celestial realm, it was essentially impossible for emperor tiers to advance to the celestial king tier. However, this was a transcendent dimension, so there were also infinite possibilities. "What about me?" a voice suddenly said in a calm manner. Another ninth heaven celestial king suddenly appeared. "Yang Q!" Jean Feiyu exclaimed, his pupils immediately contracting. He looked toward this ninth heaven celestial king. Yang Q was the second most powerful person in Ghost King City. He had the appearance of a handsome and carefree young man in his 20s, and there were also semispheres on the back of his two hands. If they were combined, they would form the yin and yang symbol. Jean Feiyu wore a solemn expression. Yang Q was no weaker than him, so if they engaged in battle, it would be extremely difficult to determine a victor. Moreover, there were several other ninth heaven celestial kings present. Even though they were all weaker than him, their combined battle prowess naturally couldn't be ignored. If they ganged up on him, he would be in huge trouble. However, the most terrifying person was naturally the Azure Ghost Celestial King. If Jean Feiyu were trapped, and the Azure Ghost Celestial King came over, the former would truly face certain death. "Brother Jean, since you've come to Ghost King City, why didn't you give me a heads up? I was unable to fulfill my duty as a host. Why don't you stay for some tea? We can discuss cultivation over tea." "That sounds like a fairly good plan, no?" Yang Q said. His voice was calm and composed. Jean Feiyu chuckled, and said, "I'm an extremely busy person. How about Brother Yang coming over to prosperous opening city next time?" He didn't hesitate a single bit as he turned around to leave. He didn't give the celestial kings a chance to surround him. Yang Q was the first to move as he stepped forward, as quick as lightning. After reaching the ninth heaven, perhaps not even 1 in 100 million people would advance to become a heavenly venerate. Thus, they all had sufficient time to cultivate more regulations. Moreover, The regulations of time and the regulations of space were naturally the two most likely regulations for them to cultivate. Thus, the speed of most ninth heaven celestial kings was fairly similar. As long as their aptitude was similar, their grasp of the regulations of time and regulations of space would also be fairly similar. This was unless it were a newly advanced ninth heaven celestial king who hadn't had the time to cultivate these regulations yet. Thus, it was extremely difficult for celestial kings to pursue fellow celestial kings. This was especially the case for ninth heaven celestial kings. Without an advantage in cultivation, and without an advantage in regulations, how could they possibly catch up? Chapter 2588, Unexpected Return. Chapter 2588, Unexpected Return. Zhang Feiyu fled, while Yang Qiu gave pursuit. Behind them, there was also a trail of ninth heaven celestial kings from Ghost King City, all of them traveling at immense speed. However, the initiative was in Zhang Feiyu's hands since he had fled first. Thus, as long as he wasn't obstructed, he wouldn't need to worry about getting caught. This was already the outskirts of the city to begin with, so with the speed of ninth heaven celestial kings, they could genuinely exit the city in just 2 or 3 steps. A relaxed expression appeared on Zhang Feiyu's face. At the same time, however, there was also a hint of fury. He had actually been forced to scurry like a rat. He was truly unwilling to accept this. Since you've already entered Ghost King City, don't you want to stay for a little longer? A voice suddenly said with a cold chuckle. An eerie azure hand that was colossal in size suddenly reached over from the center of the city, slamming over at an incredible speed. This was a skeletal hand, completely azure in color and as uncanny as could be. Zhang Feiyu instantly shuddered in fear. This was the hand of the Azure Ghost Celestial King. He didn't dare to face this attack at all. Otherwise, if he were obstructed by this hand and surrounded by Yang Qiu and the others, he definitely wouldn't be able to flee. However, the speed of the skeletal hand was incredible, and this was most likely a strike that the Azure Ghost Celestial King had been preparing for a long time. Peng! The hand slammed into Zhang Feiyu's back, causing him to violently vomit blood. However, Zhang Feiyu didn't stop at all. Instead, he continued to flee with all his might, crashing through layers of space and shooting forward hundreds of kilometers in an instant. He successfully exited the city. When a ninth heaven celestial king was intent on fleeing, it was truly difficult to stop them. Tang Mingbo bellowed in rage, continuing his pursuit as he roared, "Old bastard, stop right there." The culprit who had killed his son was hiding inside Zhang Yufei's spatial god tool, so how could he let him flee? Even though Zhang Feiyu had already fled far into the distance, Tang Mingbo's bellow had also contained some divine sense fluctuation. Thus, he was able to hear him clearly. This caused him to feel extremely vexed. He hadn't done anything. Yet, he was being chased and beaten as if he were a rat. Moreover, even a weakling such as Tang Mingbo dared to act so arrogantly toward him. Fuck. Which bastard had screwed him over? No, he couldn't scurry away just like this. He had to make head or tail of the situation. Otherwise, he would become an absolute joke. Without knowing where he had gone wrong, his scheme of countless years had been ruined just like that. Following the escape of Zhang Feiyu, Yang Qiu and the others also dispersed, going back where they had come from. After all, was there any point in remaining? However, this encounter also gave them a timely warning about just how poor the defenses of Ghost King City were. The second-in-command of an opposing force had already infiltrated their place, yet they hadn't known about it at all. Thus, they naturally had to strengthen their defenses. Otherwise, if Prosperous Opening City had launched an invasion, they would have only learned about it when the enemy forces would have been already in the city. Ling Han wore a strange expression. He truly hadn't imagined that things would have taken such a wild turn. By the looks of things, Lu Gaochuan and the others most likely believed that he had already fled Ghost King City. If he made an unexpected return now. Hee. Ling Han casually strolled around, randomly finding a place to rest. He decided to return to Lu Li's residence tonight. Not a single person would be prepared for his unexpected return. After half a day, he secretly snuck into Lu Li's residence. His aura was completely hidden. After all, he was here to hunt, so he naturally didn't want to become the hunted instead. With his improved heaven-deceiving technique, even first-tier heavenly venerates wouldn't be able to see through him. Thus, even if there were ninth heaven celestial kings present, Ling Han still wouldn't need to worry about being caught. Even so, he still remained cautious as he scoured the courtyard. Because he was afraid that there might be ninth heaven celestial kings present, Ling Han naturally didn't dare to release his divine sense. Otherwise, if he were caught, he would have nowhere to flee. After snooping around for a while, he arrived in a building where he could faintly hear some conversation. He immediately recognized one of the people as Lu Li. "Found you." He became increasingly careful, silently sneaking over and peeking through the crack in the door. Thanks to the heaven-deceiving technique, even fourth heaven celestial kings would fail to notice his existence when walking past him. After all, this was a technique that could deceive even the heavens, to say nothing of people. There were only two people in the room. One was Lu Li, and the other was also a young man. However, even though he looked young, and even though there were no ribbons of iridescent light around him, Ling Han had a feeling that this person was definitely more powerful than him. Moreover, this person's appearance bore slight resemblance to that of Lu Li. However, he definitely wasn't Lu Gaochuan. Ling Han had seen Lu Gaochuan before. "Are you all right?" the young man asked Lu Li. "Thank you for your concern, uncle. Your nephew is feeling fine," Lu Li replied respectfully. "Uncle? This person is Lu Gaochuan's brother?" "Heh. I don't think I've heard of this person before. Hang on, was it because of the sudden appearance of this uncle that Lu Li suddenly enjoyed an explosive rise in power? And thus Tang Yuan was forced to surrender and even wear a floral dress? Otherwise, things can't be explained. However, even if he's a ninth heaven celestial king, what right does he have to force Tang Mingbo to lower his head? Perhaps he's even more powerful than the Azure Ghost celestial king?" Ling Han became increasingly careful, channeling the heaven-deceiving technique to perfection. If he were discovered by a ninth heaven celestial king at such close range, he would definitely be caught. Lu Gaochuan's brother was called Lu Gaojian, and his eyes were filled with doting as he said, "I heard that you were almost killed by an evil person, and this made me extremely uneasy. If I hadn't been discussing an important matter with Azure Ghost at the time, I definitely wouldn't have allowed the culprit to escape." Lu Li was extremely moved upon hearing this. He felt like this uncle who he had only just reunited with loved him even more than his father. He hurriedly replied, if uncle had been there, that Li Long would have definitely been killed on the spot. If he had the opportunity, he would curry as much favor as he could. This would allow his status to rise at a meteoric rate. Indeed, he could even bed Yang Xiaoling by force. This was all thanks to his relationship with Lu Gaojian. "Uncle, your discussions with Lord Azure Ghost are far more important. Your nephew wasn't in any great danger," Lu Li said obediently. He understood how to please his uncle. However, Lu Gaojian shook his head, saying, "No one in this world is more important than you. When I catch the culprit, I'll definitely dice him into 10,000 pieces." As he said this, a terrifying killing intent erupted from his eyes, ice-cold and menacing as could be. Lu Li was extremely moved. This uncle treated him far too well. As an outsider, however, Ling Han considered many more things. This uncle treated his nephew far too well. Gasp. Lu Li isn't his biological child, is he? As an outsider, Ling Han was able to see things far more clearly. The way that Lu Gaojian looked at Lu Li was the way that only a father would look at his son. Fuck. This is far too messed up. Lu Gaojian lightly tapped his armrest as he said, "Prosperous Opening City is scheming to obtain Ghost King City, and this is something that I'm already aware of." He had come to Ghost King City with a mission, and apart from the ninth heaven celestial kings, only Lu Li knew of his existence. Thus, how could this intel have been leaked to Prosperous Opening City? How could they have cooked up a plan to target them? It was only natural that he couldn't make head nor tail of the situation. This was because it had all been one big coincidence. Ling Han giggled in his mind. To say nothing of Lu Gaojian, even heavenly venerates would get a headache if they were present. After all, everything had been a coincidence and a misunderstanding. Thus, how could there be any logical explanation? Lu Gaojian paused for a moment before retrieving a jade seal. He handed it to Lu Li, and said, "Take it. There's a cultivation technique inside, and I want you to switch to practicing this from tomorrow onward." Chapter 2589 Heavenly Venerable Tear Cultivation Technique. Chapter 2589 Heavenly Venerable Tear Cultivation Technique. Lu Li accepted the jade seal, and asked curiously, "Uncle, what kind of cultivation technique is this?" "This is the 9 Transformations Divine Scroll," Lu Gaojian replied with a serious expression. Divine Scroll. Ling Han's heart jolted upon hearing this. Only heavenly venerable tear cultivation techniques could be referred to as divine scrolls. Celestial king tear cultivation techniques could only be referred to as celestial scrolls. Lu Gaojian actually possessed a heavenly venerable tear cultivation technique. This was simply astounding. Had he dug up some heavenly venerate's grave? It was no wonder that Lu Li's status had suddenly soared. This was clearly thanks to his relationship with Lu Gaojian. Because of this, even Tang Mingbo had been forced to bow his head in submission. In fact, even the Azure Ghost Celestial King was showing favor toward him now. Otherwise, the incident with Niu Da in the tournament grounds wouldn't have occurred simply because of the Yin River Celestial King's words. Thinking back, why had the Yin River Celestial King purposefully targeted Ling Han? This was naturally because of Lu Li. The aim was to suppress Tang Yuan, and Ling Han simply became the victim. Fortunately, he had been powerful enough to resist and kill Niu Da instead. The source of all this was none other than Lu Gaojian. 9 Transformations Divine Scroll? Lu Li murmured. He still hadn't realized that this was a heavenly venerable tear cultivation technique. The 9 Transformations Divine Scroll was created by a heavenly venerate. Lu Gaojian said slowly and calmly. "What?" Lu Li instantly exclaimed in deep astonishment. His hands involuntarily started to tremble. This was a heavenly venerable tear cultivation technique. Just how paramount and mighty was this? Lu Gaojian smiled faintly. He was extremely satisfied with Lu Li's reaction. He nodded, and said, "This heavenly venerate was called the 9 Transformations Heavenly Venerate. However, he already died several epochs ago." "Heavenly venerates can actually die?" Lu Li asked in disbelief. Just how lofty and paramount were heavenly venerates? With a single finger, they could easily crush 9th heaven celestial kings to death. Yet, Lu Gaojian was actually saying that such a heavenly venerate had died. Just how could Lu Li believe this? In this world, there only exists indomitable power. However, there doesn't exist an invincible person, Lu Gaojian replied calmly. Lu Li's breathing quickened as he asked, "Whom was the 9 Transformations Heavenly Venerate killed by?" "A truly peerless individual," Lu Gaojian replied, a slight quiver in his voice. It was as if he were feeling apprehension at the mere thought of this person. "Who?" Lu Li pressed. Lu Gaojian paused for a moment before replying, "You don't have the right to know about this right now, so there's no need to keep asking. You only need to know that this cultivation technique left by the 9 Transformations Heavenly Venerate can give you an opportunity to reach the Heavenly Venerable tier." Gasp. Lu Li's hands trembled even more violently. An opportunity to reach the Heavenly Venerable tier? In his eyes, even the 9th heaven was but a distant dream. Now, however, his uncle was saying that he could potentially become a Heavenly Venerate. How could he not shake with excitement? This was absolutely unbelievable. However, Ling Han shook his head upon seeing this. A heavenly venerable tear cultivation technique was indeed paramount and profound. However, being able to become a heavenly venerate simply by obtaining such a cultivation technique? What an absolute joke. Otherwise, wouldn't the large black dog have become a heavenly venerate long ago? Perhaps Lu Gaojian had learned of this from someone else, and it was because of this that he believed it without question. After all, this was an opportunity to become a heavenly venerate. Which 9th heaven celestial king wouldn't be wild with excitement, so much so that they forgot all other matters? However, regardless of this, Ling Han still wanted to snatch this 9 Transformations Divine Scroll for himself. It wouldn't hurt to investigate it. As if handling a paramount treasure, Lu Li carefully put away the jade seal. This isn't the entirety of the 9 transformations divine scroll, Lu Gaojian suddenly said. Huh. Disappointment instantly spread across Lu Li's face. Silly child, if this were the complete 9 transformations divine scroll, you wouldn't be able to comprehend it at all, Lu Gaojian said with a chuckle. The 9 transformations divine scroll consists of 9 scrolls in total, with each expounding on a different great Tao and a different regulation. With each scroll that you grasp, your battle prowess will increase by several folds. When you grasp all 9 scrolls and integrate them together, you'll more so have an opportunity to charge through that barrier and become a heavenly venerate. Lu Li immediately became excited again, saying, then, uncle, do you have the complete 9 transformations divine scroll? I don't, Lu Gaojian replied with a shake of his head. However, there's a mighty figure who's in possession of the complete 9 transformations divine scroll. As long as we serve him to the best of our abilities, he'll generously bestow us with more scrolls from the 9 transformations divine scroll. There were flames of eagerness in Lu Li's eyes as he asked, Uncle, can we both become heavenly venerates? Definitely, Lu Gaojian replied with a smile. He gazed up at the sky before continuing, moreover, we can definitely leave this godforsaken place as well. From that moment on, we'll be able to roam free and mighty, not bound by the restrictions of this heaven and earth anymore. He paused for a brief moment before saying, have a good rest. When you wake up tomorrow, you can start practicing the 9 transformations divine scroll. Aim to comprehend it as soon as possible. If you come across anything you don't understand, don't hesitate to directly come to me and ask. Your cultivation level is still low, and I initially wanted to pass the 9 transformations divine scroll to you only when your cultivation level became higher. However, because of the incident with Ling Han, Lu Gaojian had decided to raise the strength of his nephew. He didn't want to feel sorrow and regret for a lifetime. He took his leave. Whoosh! With a flash, he immediately disappeared from sight. However, how could Lu Li rest at this moment? He was far too excited. He retrieved the jade seal and pressed it to his forehead, absorbing the information inside it. However, he immediately felt a cold chill, which caused him to involuntarily put the jade seal down. He was overcome with shock. This was because someone had suddenly appeared behind him. He wanted to call Yuan, yet he immediately recalled that Yuan had been severely wounded in the battle during the day. Right now, Yuan was still lying on a bed. He was far too accustomed to having Yuan protect him, so he had subconsciously tried to call him for help. Ling Han wore a beaming smile as he said, "You don't mind giving this to me, right?" He reached over to take the jade seal. At this moment, how could Lu Li possibly oppose him? He couldn't do anything at all, and the jade seal fell into Ling Han's hands. The gulf in battle prowess between them was a whopping 5 heavens. This was no longer just a crushing advantage. This was already a galactic advantage. Who are you? Don't you know that you're bringing huge trouble upon yourself? Lu Li said in a quivering voice. Oh, so you don't recognize this appearance of mine? Ling Han mused. Right now, he wasn't disguised as Li Long. Instead, he was showing his true appearance. With a single thought, he immediately reverted to his original appearance. Why you? It's you. Lu Li exclaimed in terror. His face became as white as a sheet. He definitely hadn't imagined that the intruder was actually Ling Han. How could he be so audacious? He had only just left in the morning, yet he had already snuck back at night. You finally recognize me now? Ling Han said with a chuckle. He hadn't imagined that there would be a day when others didn't recognize his true appearance. Instead, it was actually his false identity that was mighty and infamous. Don't you do anything crazy. My father and my uncle are both 9th heaven celestial kings, and my uncle is more so working for a supremely powerful person right now. If you dare to touch even a single hair of mine, you'll definitely meet a tragic end, Lu Li said in threat. Ling Han immediately reached over and tugged, ripping a large handful of hair from Lu Li's scalp. Lu Li screamed in agony, his voice astonishingly loud. In fact, he wasn't truly hurting so much. Rather, he was screaming so loudly in order to give a signal, telling others that he was in danger. Ling Han smiled faintly, and said, "Don't harbor such futile hopes. I've already sealed the surrounding space, so no one will hear you even if you scream your lungs out. Lu Li's face instantly became ashen. Perhaps other fourth heaven celestial kings wouldn't be able to block his calls for help. However, if Ling Han said that he was able to, then he was definitely able to. This person was far too freakish. Lu Li shook in fear, terrified of the fatal threat that stood before him. In fact, he was the same as Tang Yuan. He was nothing more than a profligate second-generation young master. When he had power, he would act with as much arrogance and haughtiness as he could. However, when he was in an inferior position, he would lose all composure and courage. Chapter 2590 Luring the Enemy Away. Chapter 2590 Luring the Enemy Away. Tell me about your uncle, Ling Han said. He was extremely curious about Lu Gaojian's background and the supremely mighty figure that he had spoken of. This was someone who could causally bestow a heavenly venerable tier cultivation technique upon someone. Just who was he? His boldness was simply astonishing. Lu Li didn't dare to conceal anything at all as he comprehensively revealed everything to Ling Han. In the past, the two brothers, Lu Gaochuan and Lu Gaojian, had offended a powerful force. After being captured, they weren't executed, but instead tossed into the Celestial King graveyard. After arriving here, the two brothers worked together for many years. However, because of a woman, they ultimately went their separate ways. This woman was none other than Lu Li's mother. Ling Han was able to guess even more things. Perhaps Lu Gaochuan had discovered that Lu Gaojian was having an illicit relationship with his wife, so the two brothers had turned against each other. Whether or not this was true wasn't important. In any case, Lu Gaochuan was truly a fortunate person. After so many years, he surprisingly hadn't been killed, and he had instead become a ninth heaven celestial king. Meanwhile, Lu Gaojian was even more impressive. Not only had he become a ninth heaven celestial king, but he had even become acquainted with a mighty figure and come to Ghost King City as his representative. He was treated as an esteemed guest, and all of the other ninth heaven celestial kings were trying to suck up to him. This was because he was in possession of the 9 transformations divine scroll. Only through him could these celestial kings obtain part of the 9 transformations divine scroll. This was a prison that everyone wanted to escape. However, unless they became a heavenly venerate, they wouldn't have the power to break out by themselves. Ling Han asked about the supremely mighty figure, yet Lu Li didn't know a single thing about this person. This was because Lu Gaojian had kept his lips sealed regarding this person. How useless can you be? Is there any point in leaving you alive? Ling Han said. Don't kill me. I'll give you anything you want, Lu Li begged. No need for so much trouble, Ling Han said as he threw a punch. Peng. Lu Li's head instantly exploded into smithereens. Ling Han immediately turned around to leave. Once news of Lu Li's death spread, commotion would definitely engulf the city once again. After finding a hidden location, Ling Han reverted to his true appearance and entered his spatial celestial tool. He then started to investigate the 9 transformations divine scroll with the Empress and bewitching Maiden Ru. The cultivation levels of Liu Yutong and the others were far too low, so they naturally couldn't comprehend the cultivation techniques of heavenly venerates. Indeed, Ling Han had only been able to practice the indestructible Heaven's Scroll thanks to the help of Black Tower. Otherwise, it would have simply been impossible. After pressing the jade seal to his forehead, countless symbols immediately started to churn in his mind. However, these symbols were mystical and complicated, and Ling Han was unable to comprehend the secrets hidden within them. This was a heavenly venerable tier cultivation technique, after all, so how could it be learned so easily? However, Ling Han had practiced the indestructible Heaven's Scroll before, so he immediately came to a realization. Even though this cultivation technique was hard to grasp, trying to comprehend it wouldn't be insurmountably difficult. The 9 transformations Heavenly Venerate hadn't split this cultivation technique into 9 scrolls in order to purposefully make things difficult for others. Instead, this was a decision filled with wisdom. Of course, it was no easy task to link and fuse 2 different scrolls of the 9 transformations divine scroll together. This is a heavenly venerable tier cultivation technique, so it's indeed worth learning. The 3 of them started to earnestly investigate the cultivation technique. Time quickly flowed by, and it was as if they had completely forgotten about the outside world. This cultivation technique was indeed worthy of their time and effort. While they cultivated in peace and quiet, Ghost King City was experiencing tumult and unrest. Lu Li had been killed. If this had been before, Lu Li's death would have still caused some commotion, but he was still nothing more than a second-generation young master, after all. At most, it would have only enraged Lu Gaochuan and made him want to kill someone as he scoured the city for the culprit. This time, however, things were very different. This was naturally because of Lu Li's uncle, or perhaps his father. After learning of Lu Li's death, Lu Gaojian was even more enraged and frenzied than Lu Gaochuan. Moreover, as a representative of that supremely mighty figure, he also had a humongous influence over Ghost King City. Thus, the entire city instantly fell into commotion and unrest. People were hunting for the culprit everywhere. The biggest suspect was naturally Zhang Feiyu. He had seemingly left Ghost King City, but he had, in fact, snuck back at night and carried out another assassination. This old fucking bastard. He truly deserved death. They naturally wouldn't be able to find Zhang Feiyu in the city. Thus, Lu Gaojian made a request to the Azure Ghost Celestial King, asking him to deploy troops to attack prosperous opening city to exact revenge for Lu Li. However, the Azure Ghost Celestial King was neither stupid nor reckless. He could accept cooperation with the supremely mighty figure that Lu Gaojian represented for the sake of obtaining the 9 transformations divine scroll. In fact, he would even be willing to serve this person. However, he definitely wouldn't be so reckless as to engage in conflict with prosperous opening city simply for the sake of Lu Gaojian. Of course, this was unless Lu Gaojian could provide him with an army that was no weaker than that of Ghost King City. With the two forces combined, attacking prosperous opening city wouldn't result in too many losses. The two parties couldn't come to a consensus, so any discussions about attacking prosperous opening city naturally became moot. 3 years later, Ling Han was the first to exit his state of cultivation. He now had a preliminary grasp of the 9 transformations divine scroll. The indestructible heavens scroll focused on defense, tempering one's physique, and increasing one's recovery ability. Meanwhile, the 9 transformations divine scroll focused on offense, with each scroll requiring one to cultivate a different great Tao. By fusing all 9 great Tao together, one would be able to transcend the regulations and comprehend a peerless power. This scroll of the 9 transformations divine scroll focused on the great Tao of metal. Metal, a representation of intensity and killing intent. Ling Han raised his hands. His left hand was encircled by the simple regulations of metal, while his right hand was encircled by the great Tao of metal summoned through the 9 transformations divine scroll. He threw a punch with both hands, striking 2 different boulders. The boulders in the Celestial King graveyard were all extremely tough and sturdy. Even though both boulders cracked open after being punched, one only split into 7 pieces, while the other was smashed into smithereens. The one smashed into smithereens had been struck by his right hand. Ling Han could guarantee that he had used the same amount of power in both fists. However, the results were as different as could be. This was evidence of the 9 transformations divine scroll's immense power. After fusing all 9 scrolls together, the resulting might will be unfathomable, Ling Han said with emotion. This was the cultivation technique of a heavenly venerate, after all. Which heavenly venerate wasn't a supreme prodigy? How I wish to obtain the other scrolls, Ling Han murmured to himself. Through Lu Gaojian, the supremely mighty figure was using this 9 transformations divine scroll to recruit the Azure Ghost Celestial King and the others. Even though the ability to become a heavenly venerate was definitely a lie, the value of this cultivation technique was still astounding. This place seemingly harbors many secrets. If the ascending dragon pill can be mass-produced in the outside world, it can definitely transform the power of the entire dimension. And this 9 transformations divine scroll. Why does a heavenly venerable tier cultivation technique exist in this place? And what is that mighty figure scheming? Ling Han mulled over this for a moment, but he naturally couldn't make head nor tail of the situation. He exited the spatial celestial tool, and started to hunt down the second-generation young masters in the city. Who could stop him? Ghost King City instantly descended into commotion and unrest again. Many high-level celestial kings were infuriated, taking this as a sign of severe provocation from prosperous opening city. They had no option but to counterattack. This time, even the Azure Ghost Celestial King couldn't suppress the combined rage of the Celestial Kings anymore. He decided to deploy a large army to attack prosperous opening city. The large army was quickly gathered together and deployed, with the Azure Ghost Celestial King personally going with them as well. Add to that Yang Q, Lu Gaojian, and many other Ninth Heaven Celestial Kings, and it could be said that this was a vast and mighty army. Ling Han stood atop the city walls as he gazed at the large army disappearing into the horizon. A faint smile involuntarily tugged at the corners of his lips. He had successfully lured his enemies away. Now, he could visit the Azure Ghost Celestial King's residence and comb through it, figuring out the secrets behind the ascending dragon pill. Chapter 2591, Brahmin Celestial Flower. Chapter 2591, Brahmin Celestial Flower. Ling Han had always been very curious about the ascending dragon pill. Just how was this pill refined? It could actually help those with mediocre talent reach the Celestial King tier. In fact, it could even help them progress through the Celestial King tier. This was extremely abnormal. Transcendent dimensions were indeed impressive and powerful. However, this was over the top. In any case, a city lord should be very wealthy, right? Ling Han stealthily made his way to the city lord's residence. He was extremely careful as he snuck around, and using his heaven-deceiving technique and his own skills, it was as if he were entering a realm with no other person. The Azure Ghost Celestial King wasn't present, so it was extremely likely that no one would discover Ling Han even if he didn't use the heaven-deceiving technique. The Yin River Celestial King didn't reside here, either, and he instead lived in a different place. Even though there were still a few Sixth Heaven Celestial Kings patrolling the residence, this naturally wasn't enough to put Ling Han in any danger. He simply needed to remain cautious. In fact, it was his lack of familiarity with this place that was the biggest challenge. He had no choice but to run around in circles and search for the treasures of the Azure Ghost Celestial King room by room. Thus, it took him until midnight to finally find what he wanted. This was a study. However, there existed a small formation that isolated an area of space. If it had been any other ordinary Fourth Heaven Celestial King, they definitely wouldn't have discovered this area. In fact, even Seventh Heaven Celestial Kings might have failed to discover it. However, Ling Han was well versed in the regulations of space, so even the smallest bit of imperfection could catch his attention. Thus, he had immediately locked his gaze on the small formation. However, discovering this formation was one matter, and being able to open it was another matter. This was a formation laid out by a Ninth Heaven Celestial King, after all, with the complicated formation symbols extremely difficult to understand and resolve. Ling Han wasn't pressed for time, however, as the battle between the two cities would naturally take longer than a day or two. Moreover, others generally wouldn't enter this place, so he could naturally take his time as he investigated this formation. Sure enough, Ling Han took his time with the formation. 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. Time continued to flow by. Along with it, Ling Han's understanding of the formation also started to grow. All kinds of comprehension started to pop up in his mind. In fact, these comprehensions were extremely helpful to his cultivation as well. Half a year later, delight finally appeared on Ling Han's face. He had resolved the formation. This had truly been grueling work. Ling Han wiped his forehead. Even though there was no sweat, he felt like he had just been engaged in an intense battle. For the past 6 months, he had been engrossed in his investigation of the formation. In fact, he had even accelerated time such that the 6 months had already become over 500 years for him. Spending 500 years to resolve a formation laid out by a Ninth Heaven Celestial King wasn't slow at all. In any case, this was all thanks to the absence of the Azure Ghost Celestial King. Otherwise, how could Ling Han have stayed here for 6 months? Were Ninth Heaven Celestial Kings mere decorations? After unlocking the formation, what appeared before Ling Han was a small space that contained many ascending dragon pills. Ling Han naturally took all of these. There was no need to be polite. Apart from these, he also discovered a pill recipe. This was the pill recipe for the ascending dragon pill. Ling Han glanced over it, and a look of deep astonishment spread across his face. This was because the ingredients for the ascending dragon pill were as simple as could be. In fact, the only ingredient was the fruits of Brahmin celestial flowers. A single ingredient. Perhaps only the lowliest alchemical pills would require a single ingredient, yet the ascending dragon pill was clearly a valuable celestial king tier pill. This was inconceivable. Unfathomable. Not only that, but the method to concoct the ascending dragon pill was also extremely simple. To say nothing of 5-star grandmasters, even amateur apprentices would be able to concoct it with ease. This was far too abnormal. It was as if the fruits of Brahmin celestial flowers were already semi-finished products. No, not semi-finished, but close to 99% finished. The so-called refinement process was nothing more than performing some packaging. What in the world is this Brahmin celestial flower? I feel like I've heard Tang Yuan mention it before. Ling Han racked his brain for an answer. Back then, Tang Yuan had told him about winning a gamble with Zhao Shuang, from which he had obtained a few Brahmin celestial flowers. Ling Han hadn't paid much heed at the time. However, with his memory, he would never forget what he had heard. Thus, with some thought, he was able to recall this conversation. It seems like many celestial kings are cultivating this type of celestial medicine. Ling Han left the residence of the city lord. Right now, he wanted to find the herbal garden of the Azure Ghost Celestial King. He wanted to see this Brahmin celestial flower for himself. The location of the garden wasn't a secret, and he was able to quickly obtain it after asking around a little. However, when Ling Han arrived, he discovered that it was actually being guarded by an 8th heaven celestial king. He could rival ordinary 7th heaven celestial kings, and he would need to summon his divine demon sword and unleash his full strength if he came across monarch tier 7th heaven celestial kings. If his opponent were slightly more powerful, however, he would be unable to rival them. After all, the gulf in cultivation level wasn't so easy to overcome. If I obtain all 9 scrolls of the 9 transformations divine scroll and comprehend all of them, I can most likely rival celestial kings such as the Yin River Celestial King even without using my divine demon sword. However, I'm unable to do that now. I'm more so no match for 8th heaven celestial kings. Ling Han didn't have blind confidence in his own abilities. Only when recognizing one's own strengths and weaknesses could one be regarded as an elite. Otherwise, they wouldn't be far from death. With an 8th heaven celestial king standing guard, Ling Han naturally couldn't have his way with the herbal garden. However, it wasn't only the Azure Ghost Celestial King who owned a herbal garden in the city, and it wasn't only the Azure Ghost Celestial King who raised Brahmin celestial flowers. Thus, Ling Han could look for other targets. Whom should he target? Ling Han's eyes lit up. He had killed several second-generation young masters recently, and this was the fundamental reason behind Ghost King City waging war on prosperous opening city. However, as the death toll piled up, the 9th heaven celestial kings naturally increased their defenses as well. Afterward, it became increasingly difficult to carry out his assassinations. Thus, some of the second-generation young masters were still alive. For example, Zhao Shuang and Yang Xiaoling. Ling Han decided to pay Zhao Shuang a visit. Since he could offer Brahmin celestial flowers for a gamble, he most likely had some understanding of them. Ling Han visited Zhao Shuang's residence first. However, after the numerous assassination cases, Zhao Shuang had already moved to his father's residence. Compared to freedom, staying alive was far more important. Zhao Shuang's father was called Zhao Yuanyi, and he had naturally followed the Azure Ghost Celestial King to war. He obviously couldn't stay to look after his son just because the latter hadn't been killed yet. Moreover, since Zhao Yuanyi had already joined the battle, he would naturally have to give his full commitment. Otherwise, they would be defeated by prosperous opening city one by one. As such, Ling Han charged into Zhao Yuanyi's residence. Of course, he was still extremely careful and cautious, keeping an eye out for any potential traps. After all, who knew if a 9th heaven celestial king would suddenly pop out? He continued to sneak forward, not releasing his divine sense to scan the surroundings. Even so, it was still fairly easy to find Zhao Shuang. The latter was currently in a large hall enjoying a feast with his friends. There were beautiful women performing for them, with their clothes extremely revealing and their movements extremely exaggerated and seductive. Some of the second-generation young masters were extremely profligate, with their arms around the beautiful maidservants and their hands feeling them up and down. However, Zhao Shuang appeared fairly disinterested, and it was as if something was weighing heavily on his mind. One of his underlings raised his glass, and said, "Brother Zhao, why are you in such low spirits? Come, let's have a drink." Zhao Shuang nodded in acknowledgement, raising his glass and clinking it with that of his underling. He then put the glass to his lips in a perfunctory manner. Another underling walked over, and said, "Brother Zhao, are you worried about that Li Long person? All of the lords have personally gone to fight against prosperous opening city, so how would they dare to carry out such assassinations again? There's no need to worry, Brother Zhao. That's right. The lords will definitely force prosperous opening city to hand over the culprit. After dragging him back, they'll cut him into pieces. Moreover, this is also beneficial to you, Brother Zhao." Everyone found this strange. Li Long had instilled fear and apprehension in everyone's heart, so why was this person claiming that this was beneficial? The person who had spoken and astonished everyone smiled calmly, and said, "Those who enjoy equal status with Brother Zhao have mostly been killed off already. That being the case, won't Brother Zhao be the sole leader of Ghost King City in the future?" Chapter 2592 Interrogation. Chapter 2592 Interrogation. That's right. Zhao Shuang's eyes lit up. Thinking about it carefully, how many second-generation young masters could still rival his status? There were a few, but only a very measly few. In this sense, he truly needed to express his gratitude toward the killer. This person had eliminated many of his opponents, allowing him to act even more wantonly among the second-generation young masters. Oh, indeed. We actually failed to realize this. Ha ha ha. Brother Zhao is about to become a peerless individual. We need to wholeheartedly thank that killer. Hopefully he assassinates a few more people, allowing Brother Zhao to become the most powerful young master. Everyone roared with laughter. If Zhao Shuang became the most powerful young master, their status would naturally soar as well. Zhao Shuang's mood immediately improved. He had been extremely worried over the past few days, afraid that the killer might appear in his room at any moment. However, thinking carefully, not a single assassination had occurred in the past 6 months after the lords had marched off to battle. It was clear that the culprit was also under a lot of pressure, and didn't dare to act so wantonly anymore. With this in mind, Zhao Shuang immediately felt at ease. He raised his glass and started to drink with everyone else. Ling Han had initially wanted to act after Zhao Shuang finished his feast. However, these people were far too profligate, and they continued to drink with no end in sight. They showed no signs of ending the feast. With the energy of celestial kings, they could drink for 10 years straight without any problem. Ling Han gave up on waiting. He had already familiarized himself with this residence. There was only a single 7th heaven celestial king standing guard, and this person was indeed powerful enough to be his opponent. However, Ling Han was confident that this celestial king wouldn't notice anything out of the ordinary if he acted now. Ling Han silently activated the regulations of space, sealing off the entire hall. This way, he wouldn't need to worry even if he caused a huge ruckus. The 7th heaven celestial king wouldn't be able to detect any abnormal fluctuation. After finishing his preparations, Ling Han materialized in the hall. Ling Han's sudden appearance caused everyone to falter. However, in the next instant, they all stared at him with their faces ashen and their mouths agape. Li Long. They had just been speaking about him, and now he had truly arrived. In fact, they had just been wishing for him to kill a few more second-generation young masters, thereby allowing their brother Zhao to become the sole leader of this generation. However, they had instead brought this misfortune upon themselves. LLL Li Long, someone stammered, their lips quivering in terror. Guards! Save me! Commotion instantly broke out, with everyone screaming for their lives. They all knew that they were no match for Ling Han. Thus, they could only ask powerful elites to come over to save them. Ling Han paid no heed to this. With his divine sense enveloping the area, he could easily grasp the situation inside the hall. Here, the most powerful celestial king was only at the second heaven. Moreover, they were only an emperor tier. In other words, he could kill them with a single thought. Li Long, what do you want? Zhao Shuang asked as he forced himself to calm down. He needed to buy time so that the seventh heaven celestial king could rush over to save them. Ling Han smiled faintly, saying, I'm here to ask you a few questions. He sat down before turning to the trembling maidservant next to him, and saying, please pour me some wine, thanks. The maidservant shuddered before hurriedly pouring Ling Han some wine. She was born in the celestial king graveyard, and because she was only at the severing mundane tier, she was treated like mud in this place. In Ling Han's eyes, however, she was nothing more than an innocent person. Thus, he treated her with respect. What do you want to know? Zhao Shuang asked, his voice becoming increasingly calm. However, only he knew just how violently his heart was beating. After drinking a glass of wine, Ling Han stood up, and said, there are too many people. All of you, enter. He reached out, grabbing a person and tossing them into his spatial celestial tool. Everyone's expression changed drastically. Li Long was finally revealing his murderous nature. They needed to flee. They screamed in fear as they rushed toward the exits. However, when they reached the door, they were horrified to discover that there was seemingly an invisible wall blocking their way. They couldn't leave the hall no matter what. What's going on? Why couldn't they leave the hall? And why wasn't the seventh heaven celestial king coming to save them? They were already screaming their lungs out. Were the people outside deaf? Ling Han casually reached around, grabbing celestial king after celestial king and tossing them into his spatial celestial tool after sealing their cultivation. After a dozen or so times, only the maidservants, dancers, and Zhao Shuang remained. Zhao Shuang was collapsed on his chair. He wanted to move, but he was so petrified that he couldn't even move a single finger. Ling Han reached over again, sealing Zhao Shuang's cultivation and tossing him into his spatial celestial tool as well. He then turned to the maidservants and dancers with a smile, saying, sorry for frightening you all. With a flash, he vanished without a trace. Ah! At this moment, piercing screams instantly cut through the entire Zhao residence. Whoosh! The seventh heaven celestial king immediately dashed over. However, fury instantly spread across his face when he saw the scene before him. Terrifying killing intent coursed through his body. Ling Han arrived at a hidden place in the city before entering his spatial celestial tool, where he started to interrogate Zhao Shuang. Zhao Shuang was trembling in fear, and no tears were forthcoming even though he wanted to bawl. This was truly karma. He had still been wishing for Ling Han to kill more second-generation young masters so that he could become the one and only, and Ling Han had indeed snuck over again. However, Ling Han's target was him. If he had known this, he definitely wouldn't have wished for such matters. Ling Han patted Zhao Shuang's shoulder, saying, I have a few questions for you. Brother Long, please ask away, Zhao Shuang hurriedly said. As long as he could live, he wouldn't mind abandoning his temperament as a second-generation young master. He was willing to become an obedient dog. Ling Han nodded, and asked, how much do you know about Brahmin celestial flowers? Huh! Zhao Shuang was astonished. He hadn't imagined that Ling Han would actually ask about this. Her what? Hurry up and answer me, Ling Han said with a glare. The fruits of Brahmin celestial flowers are the main ingredient for refining ascending dragon pills. They're incredibly valuable, Zhao Shuang hurriedly replied. This simple? That's all you know? Ling Han said in disappointment. Upon seeing the murderous glint in Ling Han's eyes, Zhao Shuang's heart involuntarily jolted. He hurriedly added, Brother Long, I can bring you to where my father cultivates Brahmin celestial flowers. Ling Han chuckled, and said, perhaps you want the celestial king guarding that place to kill me and then rescue you? Zhao Shuang had indeed been thinking about this. After all, Brahmin celestial flowers were far too valuable. Thus, even though his father had gone off to war, he had still left a trustworthy and powerful subordinate to guard the herbal garden. He definitely couldn't risk any accident. However, upon hearing Ling Han's words, he hurriedly shook his head. In fact, he shook his head so hard that it was as if he were about to shake it off his neck. I wouldn't dare to. How could this underling dare to have such thoughts? Brother Long, you're overthinking things. Ling Han retrieved a pill and tossed it to Zhao Shuang. Swallow it. Brother Long, what pill is this? Zhao Shuang asked with a bitter expression. A poisonous pill, of course, Ling Han answered calmly. Huh. Zhao Shuang had already been about to swallow the pill. However, upon hearing Ling Han's words, he immediately stopped his motion. This is a slow-acting poison, Ling Han said. Swallowing it won't kill you right away. However, you'll only have 3 days. Once 3 days pass, if you don't get my antidote, you can only pray to the gods. Zhao Shuang was no fool. He naturally understood what Ling Han meant. If he dared to pull any tricks, perhaps Ling Han would be killed. However, Zhao Shuang would definitely be killed as well. I understand. This was Zhao Yuanyi's command. As long as Zhao Shuang didn't take things too far, he could allow him to steal some Brahmin celestial flowers. This was his son, after all. Zhao Shuang nodded in acknowledgement before walking into the mountain. After taking a few steps, he couldn't help but steal a backward glance. He felt a strong urge in his mind, yet he ultimately didn't open his mouth. After Zhao Shuang ventured deep into the mountain, Ling Han exited his spatial celestial tool. He had already channeled the heaven-deceiving technique, so as long as he didn't attack anyone, even ninth heaven celestial kings wouldn't be able to detect his existence. Of course, this was unless they saw him with their eyes. This was a herbal garden in which many celestial medicines were being cultivated. However, many of them were extremely young, rendering them useless to celestial kings. They needed at least a few more epochs before they could be of any use. Ling Han was even more astonished upon seeing this. Even celestial king tier great herbs were extremely difficult to cultivate, so why were ascending dragon pills so abundant in number? Theoretically speaking, didn't Brahmin celestial flowers require several epochs to grow and produce fruit? This would in turn severely limit the production of ascending dragon pills. Brother Long, this is the place, Zhao Shuang said as he pointed at a plot of land. Ling Han looked over. These are Brahmin celestial flowers. This was an extremely eerie and colorful type of plant. Its stem was bright red as blood, and its leaves were purple and filled with azure veins. These colors would instantly grab one's attention. Some Brahmin celestial flowers were already blooming, with their flowers as large as fists and their petals extremely lush and healthy. Their colors were more so extremely attractive. Some were still flower buds, while some had already produced fruit, which were similarly colorful. Ling Han walked over for a closer look. These flowers were extremely colorful. In fact, they were so colorful that they seemed eerie and bewitching. Ling Han couldn't help but feel a sinister aura from them. This wasn't an illusion. Ling Han could smell blood. Ling Han turned around and asked, "What are these flowers watered with?" "Brother Long, I feel like I can't breathe. Did you calculate the time wrong? Is the poison already spreading?" Zhao Shuang was extremely anxious and uneasy, and he didn't hear Ling Han's question at all. "Pa." Ling Han gave him a good slap, finally waking him up. Zhao Shuang cradled his face in grief as he said, "Brother Long, why did you hit me?" "I asked you a question." Zhao Shuang shuddered, but he still asked, "Brother Long, what did you ask?" Ling Han shook his head before repeating his question again. "I don't know," Zhao Shuang replied with a shake of his head. Ling Han didn't ask any more questions. In the eyes of this second-generation young master, there was nothing more to it than Brahmin celestial flowers and astonishing wealth. As for how these Brahmin celestial flowers were cultivated, Zhao Shuang didn't care at all. As Ling Han continued to observe the Brahmin celestial flowers, a speculation slowly formed in his mind. After a while, he suddenly shuddered before turning to Zhao Shuang and saying, "Someone's coming over. Don't give away any clues." Whoosh! He entered the spatial celestial tool. Sure enough, it wasn't long before someone walked over. This was a fifth heaven celestial king. After seeing Zhao Shuang, he hurriedly greeted him in respect, saying, "This underling pays his respects to young master." Zhao Shuang nodded in acknowledgement. The fifth heaven celestial king walked up to the field of Brahmin celestial flowers before sweeping his hand and tossing forth numerous corpses. There were the corpses of humans, beasts, birds, and many more. However, they were all celestial kings. Even though they had died, they still radiated with a powerful aura that couldn't be faked. Zhao Shuang's eyes widened in disbelief. This was because Ling Han had only just asked about this a moment ago, so he was able to immediately connect the dots. Sure enough, the fifth heaven celestial king chopped the corpses of the celestial kings into pieces, transforming them into blood, water, and bone scraps as he buried them in the field. His movements were practiced, and it was as if he had already done this many times before. Thus, he was able to finish his task in no time. He then turned to Zhao Shuang, nodding, and said, "This subordinate will take his leave now." Zhao Shuang was still transfixed with shock, so he simply gave a stiff nod of acknowledgement. After the celestial king left, Ling Han reappeared once again. His expression was solemn. Sure enough, it was as he had speculated. Before, he had always been curious about why ascending dragon pills only existed in the celestial king graveyard. Moreover, the effects of these pills were so potent and heaven-defying. Now, the answer had finally appeared before him. This was because Brahmin celestial flowers were cultivated using the corpses of celestial kings. This was equivalent to using celestial kings to raise more celestial kings. Moreover, this behavior would definitely lead to a huge waste of resources. Perhaps the corpses of 10 celestial kings could only raise a single celestial king. However, this didn't matter. This was the celestial king graveyard, so a large number of celestial kings would be sent here each year, providing them with a large amount of resources. It was no wonder why so many celestial kings without a powerful background were also tossed into this place. This was the fundamental reason. Hang on. If ascending dragon pills can't be taken to the outside world, why do the celestial kings in the outside world need to do this? Why do they insist on tossing these celestial kings inside? Gasp. Ling Han instantly came to a realization. This was very likely related to a colossal black market. Chapter 2594, Studying the Real Body. Chapter 2594, Studying the Real Body. In the outside world, there had to be forces stretching out their hands, enabling them to obtain the ascending dragon pill. Perhaps there was not just one such force like this. Furthermore, because of the effects of the ascending dragon pill, the forces that were involved in this profitable business had to be extremely powerful, and might even have heavenly venerable tier background. Otherwise, how could they bring out the ascending dragon pill? Putting himself in the shoes of another, if Ling Han was a heavenly venerate himself, what would he do to obtain the ascending dragon pill? Send a 9th heaven celestial king here. Moreover, it had to be one that was extremely strong in terms of battle prowess, the kind that could conquer a city. In that case, they could then obtain a great number of celestial king tier bodies, allowing them to cultivate the Brahmin celestial flowers on a large scale. At a certain time, he would then move, unlocking the celestial king graveyard, and retrieve the ascending dragon pill. This was not jailbreak, so it was not difficult for them to achieve this. Otherwise, they could use the excuse that the celestial king that they had sent was training here, and retrieve both their subordinate and the alchemical pill itself. For example, the black donkey would retrieve Ling Han after 100 million years, so how could it be that other heavenly venerates could not do something similar? Ling Han frowned deeply. This should be a massive black market chain of profits. If he touched it, he could possibly be targeted by a heavenly venerable. Perhaps it was not just one heavenly venerate, either, but a few, or even more than that. I do indeed have a halo of calamity on me, he mused ruefully. He had entered this place only for the sake of battle so he could rapidly increase his own cultivation level. He had not expected that he would come into contact with such a great matter. Naturally, he could just stand by and watch. In any case, the majority of celestial kings that had been tossed here were all deserving of their punishment. I don't know what's the matter, but I keep having a feeling something is off. Ling Han pondered deeply. Even if he had discovered the secret of the ascending dragon pill, this was equivalent to having a considerable number of celestial kings being sacrificed for the sake of a single celestial king. However, as an alchemist, he still could not accept this kind of alchemical pill completely. Alchemical pills were never as simple as that. If it was expanded in this manner, then wouldn't it mean that the refinement of over a dozen Celestial King tier great herbs produced the same effects as the Ascending Dragon pill? No way. So how could the Ascending Dragon pill do this? Ling Han could not explain it, but with the instincts of an alchemy emperor, he felt that the Brahmin celestial flowers were not as simple as something nurtured with the flesh and blood of celestial kings. He plucked 2 Brahmin celestial flowers, which he stowed into the spatial celestial tool. He could slowly study them in the future. Then, Zhao Shuang led him away. How could Zhao Shuang dare to say anything else? He immediately left with his spatial celestial tool, and did not even bring any Brahmin celestial flowers with him. That was because he knew that if he did take any with him, he would still have to surrender them to Ling Han. When he left, that 8th heaven celestial king came out to take a look. When he discovered that only 2 Brahmin celestial flowers had been taken, he allowed Zhao Shuang to leave easily. Otherwise, he would definitely make Zhao Shuang hand over the Brahmin celestial flowers. After leaving At present, Ling Han had already found out all that he should know. Hence, should he still continue staying in Ghost King City? After thinking for a while, Ling Han decided to stay. It was precisely because there were a great many 9th heaven celestial kings that all wanted to capture him that this would give him enough pressure so that he could maintain this rapid increase of his cultivation level. Then, let's have a fair fight. Ling Han's fighting spirit blazed hotly. The greater the pressure, the higher his fighting spirit would soar. Furthermore, his character was also very stubborn. You people want to capture me and kill me, but I will choose to stay here and bring trouble to you. Moreover, he also wanted to find out the origins of that mysterious powerful figure from Lu Gaojian. Who exactly was he? Previously, he did not understand, but now, because of the Ascending Dragon pill, it was possible that this involved the contest among several powerful forces, which were all fighting over the market for Brahmin celestial flowers. That was because the more power their subordinates grasped, the more Brahmin celestial flowers they could cultivate. Correspondingly, the more Ascending Dragon pills there would be as well. If this thing was brought outside, it would be something that could change the power structure of a world. Zhao Shuang's disappearance naturally caused a great commotion inside the city. This meant that the mysterious murderer had not practiced any restraint because of the invasion of the Azure Ghost Celestial King and the others against prosperous Opening City. He had once more stretched out his hand to do evil. Yet thinking from another aspect, was it prosperous Opening City that could no longer hold up to the pressure, and had to use this kind of method to force the invading troops into retreat? The people of Ghost King City did not know, because the distance between the 2 cities was too large. Another year passed, and the invading troops finally returned. A great many celestial kings were injured, and there were also a considerable number that would never be able to return. However, the Azure Ghost Celestial King gave an announcement that caused great excitement, and that was that they had won. They had forced prosperous Opening City to pay an extremely exorbitant price in exchange for stopping the assault of their troops. However, once they returned to the City Lord's residence, the expressions of all the 9th heaven celestial kings darkened. Though they were victorious, their losses were also tremendous. More importantly, they had made a great mistake. That was because that Li Long was not from prosperous Opening City at all. Zhon Feiyu had even placed a Dao oath, and claimed that he did not know Li Long at all, and had completely no links to Lu Li's death at all. A Dao oath could still be trusted. Thus, the Azure Ghost Celestial King and the others were certain that Zhon Feiyu should have just happened to bear the blame for Ling Han. However, whether it was Zhon Feiyu or prosperous Opening City, neither of them could remove themselves from the matter entirely, because they had indeed been scheming against Ghost King City. The 2 sides did not continue fighting, because though the side of Ghost King City had the upper hand, it was not a crushing advantage. If they did not withdraw their troops, then even if Ghost King City's side could win, it would be a Pyrrhic victory, and their strength would drop to rock bottom. By then, other forces could take the chance to attack them, and that would be equivalent to them having paved the way for others. That Li Long, who exactly is he? The Azure Ghost Celestial King asked gravely. Master, according to my investigations, This person should have just recently entered into the Celestial King graveyard. The Yin River Celestial King immediately stepped out and related his information about Ling Han. Actually, it was nothing secret. Ling Han had overcome various opponents in the tournament grounds and was extremely bold and invincible. This was something that was known to everyone. It is definitely abnormal for a mere fourth heaven celestial king to possess such battle prowess, Tang Mingbo declared gravely. By now, he had completely calmed down. Fury had no use to him when trying to avenge the death of his son. True. The Azure Ghost Celestial King nodded in agreement. To say nothing of Supreme Monarch stars, even if their evolution index had reached 12, there is no possible way he could match a 7th heaven celestial king when he himself is only in the 4th heaven. He should be holding a colossal secret, Lu Gaochuan said, and glanced at Lu Gaojian. Could it be that he, too, holds the secret of heavenly venerable tier? All the celestial kings exclaimed in shock. This was the only way to explain it. Because they were all 9th heaven celestial kings, they definitely could not think of any other means that could allow a 4th heaven celestial king to ignore the overwhelming suppression of cultivation level and be powerful to such a vicious, sinister extent. Since a heavenly venerable tier secret technique could appear here, why couldn't there be another? Lu Gaojian could not confirm it, either. He only knew that the 9th heaven celestial king was extremely strong, and when all 9 scrolls were united, the battle prowess was boundlessly frightening. However, he did not know whether it could give a 4th heaven celestial king the strength to fight a 7th heaven celestial king. All in all, we have to find this Li Long, the Azure Ghost Celestial King declared grimly. Previously, he has committed another crime. If we do not get rid of this boy, what will be left of our dignity? Yes. The other celestial kings all nodded. With 9th heaven celestial kings standing guard, Ling Han still managed to do as he liked, killing as he liked, then all of them would really be disgraced. Additionally, we have to investigate this Li Long further. I suspect that this identity of his may be false, the Azure Ghost Celestial King continued. Chapter 2595, Desolate Moon Alliance. Chapter 2595, Desolate Moon Alliance. Someone from the outside who had come to train? Zhao Yuanyi immediately asked. The disappearance of his son was the doing of that Li Long, so he was the one who wanted to find Ling Han more than anyone else because it was possible that his son was still alive. It is very possible. Otherwise, someone who has such astonishing battle prowess, even if he really had killed his fellow disciples, should still have been exempted from punishment, Lu Gaojian said. At present, the greatest enemy that was laid out in front of all of them was hysteria. As long as they could resist the main forces of hysteria in the future, then no matter what crime they had committed, it could still be forgiven, or at least they would be given the chance to redeem themselves by good service. With how freakish Ling Han's battle prowess was, how could he possibly be thrown into the Celestial King graveyard and allowed to rot? Hence, the chance that he had come here to train was greater. Damn it! All the Celestial Kings humphed coldly. They could be considered to feel great hatred for all those who had come here just for training. Yet the Azure Ghost Celestial King's expression was cold and aloof. That was because only he himself knew that he actually could be somewhat considered as being here to train as well, but his motive was definitely not to advance his own cultivation level, but rather the Brahmin celestial flowers. There was more that he thought about. Could Ling Han have been sent by some kind of force? Maybe his motive was the same as his, and that was for the sake of the Brahmin celestial flowers. Brother Lu, he glanced towards Lu Gaojian. When will we be acting? Lu Gaojian nodded his head, and said, the ancient tomb is extremely important. The instruction from Lord Desolate Moon is to unite the power of all the 9th heaven celestial kings inside the Celestial King graveyard and open it together. Thus, there will be no action for now. Please wait a while longer, Brother Azure Ghost. When the time comes, I will inform you. This answer did not please the Azure Ghost Celestial King very much. He frowned slightly, and asked, then when will we be able to obtain the second part of the 9 Transformations Divine Scroll? Brother Azure Ghost, do not rush. According to the agreement, when we have arrived in front of the ancient tomb, Lord Desolate Moon will hand over the second part of the 9 Transformations Divine Scroll, Lu Gaojian said smilingly. Everyone's eyes became heated. After obtaining all 9 parts of the 9 transformations divine scroll and combining them into one, they would be able to break through to the heavenly venerable tier. The temptation of this to them was really too great. Once they had become heavenly venerates themselves, they would be able to leave this fucking place. Even though they were all 9th heaven celestial kings, high and lofty, once the Ghost King city was conquered by an opposing force, the possibility that they would die with the city was extremely high. In this place, the lives of celestial kings were worth nothing, and even 9th heaven celestial kings could be sacrificed. Then we'll make use of this time, and find that Li Long first, the Azure Ghost celestial king, declared coldly. The eyes of all the 9th heaven celestial kings spat fire. There were only a rare few whose descendants had not been killed by Ling Han, so it was natural that they wanted nothing more than to capture Ling Han and execute him. Ling Han did not cease his course of bloodshed. He would occasionally make a move. If there were higher tier celestial kings on guard, he would avoid them without any battle, but if there weren't, he would move without any hesitation, causing complete chaos and mayhem in Ghost King City. He was clearly just a 4th heaven celestial king, so how could he possibly cause such great commotion? Firstly, Ghost King City was too large. Furthermore, this was a prison for holding celestial kings, with the power laid down by heavenly venerates. The ground was very firm, and had a unique weakening effect on a sweep of divine sense. Even a 9th heaven celestial king could not possibly cover every single inch of this ground. Secondly, Ling Han had copied the actions of the Azure Ghost celestial king, and made some modifications to the formation patterns, allowing his spatial celestial tool to have even better coverage. He even wanted to instill the heaven-deceiving technique into the celestial tool so it would have a disguising effect as well. This was not impossible, because celestial tools were formed from a celestial weapon equipped with one's individual martial intent in the first place. However, talking was easy, but it was not an easy matter to truly achieve this. In any case, Ling Han did not lack time. When the search efforts were intense in the city, he would study this matter inside the spatial celestial tool. Time passed quickly, and 10,000 years had already passed. Ling Han had finally instilled the heaven-deceiving technique into the spatial celestial tool so that this celestial tool would have better security. Even if a 9th heaven celestial king was staring at him, they would still be unable to distinguish it from any other ordinary stone. For the sake of this, Ling Han had also disguised this thing as a small stone. This shall be named Celestial Guest Residence. Ling Han decided to bestow this name on this spatial celestial tool. He repeated this name a few times, and thought that this name was really not bad. He was really pleased with it. However, it still cannot compare to the Black Tower yet. The Black Tower could shrink as he willed it, turning into a mote of dust, a mustard seed, but the Celestial Guest Residence still could not change its size for now. In terms of tool refinement, I still have a long way to go. Though the Celestial Guest Residence could not freely change its size, which was a disadvantage, Ling Han was already relatively satisfied. He'd just have to work the rest out step by step in the future. And after so many years, his cultivation level had also considerably improved. That was because every time he acted, it did not always mean he could escape successfully. There were a great many times that he had been hunted down by 8th heaven celestial kings, and he had only managed to escape after expending an astronomical amount of effort. Continuously roaming the border between life and death, tempering himself amidst danger, the rate of his cultivation was naturally speedy. And added with the fact that there was a large amount of celestial medicines here, the present Ling Han had already pushed the cultivation level of 4th heaven to the 3rd step. It had happened in a mere 10,000 years. Going by this kind of calculation, he would be able to break through to the 5th heaven in another 20 to 30,000 years. This speed was astonishingly rapid. And in these past 10 millennia, a great many major events had happened. A colossal alliance had taken form, and it was called the Desolate Moon Alliance. Ghost King City belonged to the Desolate Moon Alliance, and the alliance leader was a mysterious elite who went by the name Desolate Moon. It was rumored that at least 1/3 of the forces here in the Celestial King Graveyard had already fallen under the jurisdiction of the Desolate Moon Alliance by now. This compelled the other forces to have no choice but to gather together. Otherwise, wherever the blade of the Desolate Moon Alliance pointed towards, who would be able to put up any resistance? Thankfully, the internal structure of the Desolate Moon Alliance was considerably lax. Desolate Moon did not demand that every single force had to pledge their complete loyalty to him. Allies were only just allies as well. Perhaps all the forces had managed to quickly assimilate together as one precisely because of this. Ling Han had long since released Zhao Shuang, but he made the latter believe that he had fallen for a great poison, and had to occasionally ingest the antidote to suppress the poison. He was a very good spy. How could Zhao Yuanyi suspect his own son? Hence, Ling Han easily came to know a great many secrets, and also precisely due to this had Ling Han avoided the traps that were deliberately laid out by the Ninth Heaven Celestial Kings a great many times. On this day, Zhao Shuang had come to retrieve the antidote as per usual. Brother Long, I have found out some great information again. Zhao Shuang had completely lost all his temper by now. Furthermore, he was already one of the most well-known profligates in Ghost King City by now, and this was all thanks to Ling Han. Ling Han asked, "Oh, what information? Do you remember? A very long time ago, I said that my father and the others had been willing to join the Desolate Moon Alliance. Firstly, it is because of the 9 transformations divine scroll, and secondly, it is due to the ancient tomb. Once there are enough Ninth Heaven Celestial Kings gathered together, it can be opened. There are astonishing treasures that lie within," Zhao Shuang said. Ling Han nodded. Previously, Lu Gaojian received word, and informed my father that they would set out for the ancient tomb 10 days later. Zhao Shuang had indeed revealed an important piece of information. Ling Han was instantly moved, and asked, 10 days? Brother Long, are you going? Zhao Shuang asked. The underlying message was, if you are planning to go, please help remove this poison from me. I feel uneasy and anxious every single day. I really am about to break down. Ling Han grinned. Of course. He patted Zhao Shuang's shoulder. In the future, don't do too many despicable deeds. Yes, 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 Zhao Shuang nodded hurriedly. Brother Long, about the permanent antidote? Chapter 2596, Untitled. Chapter 2596, Untitled. Ling Han looked at Zhao Shuang smilingly. What eternal antidote? Ah, you were the one who poisoned me, and you don't know what the eternal antidote is? You can't play around with me like this. Zhao Shuang hurriedly replied with a grin, aren't I poisoned now? It has already been over 10,000 years. It has always been dormant inside my body, and I fear that there would be after effects. What if some kind of residual trouble is left behind? I'll be honest with you, Brother Long, I still have no children yet, so I'm afraid that it would affect the later generation. Ling Han felt an urge to burst out laughing. He had not expected that this guy's personality would change so drastically in these 10,000 years. What was left of all his previous arrogance? Changing the topic, he asked further, how many from the Ghost King City would be going? Basically, every single Ninth Heaven Celestial King would be going. There are also a few of us, these juniors and descendants, that are able to go with them, Zhao Shuang said. Are you? Ling Han looked at him. Zhao Shuang quickly shook his head. Of course, I am not going. It's so dangerous. Fuck, this cowardly brat. Ling Han shook his head, and said smilingly, go back and tell your father that you have suddenly changed your mind, and wish to go with him. Zhao Shuang's old man was a Ninth Heaven Celestial King, so it was definitely no issue for him to bring some people with him. Ah! Zhao Shuang pulled a long face. Who did not know this kind of place was the most dangerous? He really did not want to go in the slightest. In any case, it was fine since his old man had gone. Whatever they obtained, he would definitely manage to obtain a share of the profits. In this way, there was no need for him to expend effort or take any risk either, and he would be able to reap what he has not sown. With something so good, wouldn't it be very dumb for him to take the risk instead? Ling Han clapped a hand on his shoulder. No problems, right? No, Zhao Shuang could only shake his head. It couldn't be helped that his life was grasped in Ling Han's hands, right? After Zhao Shuang returned, He indeed voiced out to Zhao Yuanyi that he wanted to go to the ancient tomb. This caused Zhao Yuanyi pleasant surprise, because Zhao Shuang naturally would not say that he had been threatened, but rather that he suddenly felt that, as a man, and the descendant of a ninth heaven celestial king at that, he needed to be more courageous. This naturally made Zhao Yuanyi feel very gratified. His son was finally showing some slight promise. If he knew that this was still because his son was afraid of dying, who knew just how furious he would be? After a few days, Zhao Shuang came once more to seek out Ling Han, bringing some information with him. Aside from the various great ninth heaven celestial kings, among the second-generation young masters, the Yin River Celestial King and Yang Xiaoling would both be going, and added with Zhao Shuang, these were the only 3 remaining descendants or disciples of the 3 great ninth heaven celestial kings of Ghost King City. "I'll just follow you and be a lackey," Ling Han looked over the name list, and said to Zhao Shuang, grinning. Zhao Shuang could only grimace. How dared he treat this lord as a lackey? Several days later, the main forces set out. Ling Han mingled into the masses. Naturally, it was impossible that he would again take the form of Li Long, but it was not his true appearance either. Instead, he had just randomly altered his appearance, then had Zhao Shuang get him a false identity. The false identity that Zhao Shuang gave him was actually like a real identity. With the help of this kind of second-generation young master, what need was there for him to fear that he would not be able to pull off the deception? The group was actually very massive. Merely in terms of ninth heaven celestial kings, there were more than 20. On the other hand, it was the group of second-generation young masters that was relatively smaller, comprising of Zhao Shuang and the other 2, and added with some lackeys that they had brought with them, the total number was only over a dozen people. Ling Han did not draw anyone's attention. After all, he was just the lackey of a second-generation young master. Who would care about him? They flew the banner of the Desolate Moon Alliance, all of them seated on a warship. With ninth heaven celestial kings personally powering the warship, the speed was astonishingly quick. Furthermore, though the celestial king graveyard was extremely large, it was only a small world after all. No matter how big it was, there were still limits. 3 years later, they were finally drawing close to their destination. With ninth heaven celestial kings powering it personally, it actually still needed as many as 3 years. Because this world was turned by the power of a heavenly venerate into an independent space, the regulations of space were also greatly affected. One could teleport, but this was only possible in short ranges. It was not possible to travel over great distances through teleportation. Ling Han was sure that if he was journeying on his own, he would probably need around 20 years. Firstly, his speed was considerably slower than ninth heaven celestial kings, and secondly, it was impossible that he could journey at full speed in a single stroke over 20 years without the slightest bit of rest at all. Ahead of them, a gigantic, black-colored swamp lay. The warship stopped at the boundaries of the swamp and did not enter. Looking from midair, a black aura was wafting from the swamp. It looked like smoke as it turned into snake-like forms. This was a land of death. It was said that even ninth heaven celestial kings could not barge in here, as this could be fatal and deadly. The reason why Desolate Moon had gathered countless ninth heaven celestial kings together was so that they could conquer this whole area. That was because the ancient tomb was located in the most central zone of this swamp. Without sweeping aside all opposition in this swamp first, there would be no way for them to enter, so what was the point of speaking further of rewards? Ling Han still did not know exactly what precious treasures lay inside this ancient tomb, or was ancient the title of a certain elite, because Zhao Shuang had been unable to find out the exact details, no matter how hard he tried. Chapter 2597, Strong Resolution. Chapter 2597, Strong Resolution. Without waiting for the people of the 10,000 Dragons Alliance and Seasons Alliance to voice their objections, Desolate Moon stretched out a hand. Shua, a massive sphere of light immediately appeared in front of him. Is he going to attack? How bold. Does he plan to challenge countless ninth heaven celestial kings all by himself? Humph, just biting off more than you can chew. All the celestial kings humphed coldly as they prepared themselves for attack. Each of them only had to launch a single attack, and Desolate Moon would definitely be eliminated. However, Desolate Moon did not attack. Countless seals appeared in the light sphere before him, and something that surpassed regulations was flickering within it. This is. All the celestial kings swept over a glance, and their eyes instantly lit up. 9 Transformations Divine Scroll, a heavenly venerable tier technique. Desolate Moon stated evenly. This was created by the 9 Transformations Heavenly Venerate. It is split into 9 parts. If one can obtain all 9 parts of the Divine Scroll and master it completely, one will be able to cast aside the chains of heaven and earth and attain the Heavenly Venerable tier. What? There is actually such an amazing technique. Hiss, Heavenly Venerable tier. The people from the 10,000 Dragons Alliance and Seasons Alliance all exclaimed in shock. They had heard that Desolate Moon was teaching some kind of secret technique within his alliance, but they did not believe it at all. Who would teach such a supreme, powerful technique for nothing? This had to be the conspiracy of the Desolate Moon Alliance, and their motive was to disintegrate their enemy's alliance. It definitely could not be trusted. But who could have expected that Desolate Moon would actually have such a strong resolve to teach them the 9 Transformations Divine Scroll in public like this? This was practically. They did not know what else they could say about this. Ling Han was also stunned. To say nothing of the fact that he was unable to teach the indestructible Heaven's Scroll to others, but even if he could, it was impossible that he would just simply teach it to everyone he came across. Instead, he would control it within a strict range. For example, his wives, his son, his brothers, his disciples. But to actually teach it to one or even countless strangers, that was absolutely impossible. Just what madness had gripped Desolate Moon? It was definitely impossible that a Heavenly Venerate would allow a 9th Heaven Celestial King to advance into the Heavenly Venerable tier, and that was something Ling Han was sure about. However, a Heavenly Venerable tier technique was a Heavenly Venerable tier technique, after all, and possessed boundless might. For example, the indestructible Heaven's Scroll. As long as Ling Han had the support of enough resources, he would be able to advance his physique to the level of divine metal. Then, he would be an indestructible and immortal being among celestial kings. Out of those who had attained the Heavenly Venerable tier, who would be weaker than the other? Thus, the 9 Transformations Divine Scroll had to be able to provide a frightening boost in terms of attack power. In a battle of equal cultivation levels, it might even possibly threaten the defenses granted by the indestructible Heaven's Scroll. This kind of technique is just taught randomly and simply, Ling Han thought, but his eyes were focused on that sphere of light. No matter what, this 9 Transformations Divine Scroll was real, so he definitely would not miss out on it. In this moment, a dead silence had fallen. No one was interested in speaking. They were all greedily memorizing the 9 Transformations Divine Scroll. Every single person was staring fixedly at the sphere of light, as if that was a supreme precious treasure. The sphere of light flashed continuously, one seal after another flickering. This was a Heavenly Venerable tier technique, yet it had been split into 9 parts. It granted celestial kings the right to touch and grasp it. Otherwise, if the whole divine scroll was just thrown at them, even the most prodigious celestial king would be driven dizzy. From this aspect, the 9 Transformations Heavenly Venerate was truly amazing. About a day later, the sphere of light disappeared abruptly. Everyone was stunned, and felt a complete loss. Then, an extremely chaotic commotion burst out. "Friend Desolate Moon, why is this divine scroll incomplete?" someone asked. That's right. Since Friend Desolate Moon did not mind sharing this Heavenly Venerable tier technique with us, why don't you simply take out the entire divine scroll? Friend Desolate Moon, we will remember this kindness, and will definitely repay you in future. Ling Han scoffed internally. Even if he believed a ghost, he would not believe the words of anyone in the Celestial King graveyard. There was only slaughter and bloodshed here. There was only profit and mutual deception. Easily trusting others would only lead to death. Though these Celestial Kings spoke very nice words, they only wanted to obtain the complete 9 Transformations Divine Scroll. Perhaps they would turn around and stab Desolate Moon in the back when they truly obtained it. No one knew what Desolate Moon was thinking. His face was not revealed, and no one could discern his expression or eyes. He said calmly, "I am not being stingy here, but rather I myself only possess 3 parts of the 9 transformations divine scroll as well." When these words were said, a storm of protest rose among the crowd. With only 3 parts of the 9 transformations divine scroll, how were they to push open the doors to the heavenly venerable tier with it? Desolate Moon pressed down his hands. "However, through various clues, I have already discovered the whereabouts of the remaining 6 parts of the 9 transformations divine scroll." He paused, and then continued, "That's right. They lie within this swamp, inside the ancient tomb." When these words fell, they instantly ignited everyone's excitement. They all turned to look towards the swamp, their eyes burning and their fighting spirit soaring sky-high. As 9th Heaven Celestial Kings, they naturally could determine the authenticity of the 3 parts of the 9 transformations divine scroll they had previously seen. They were definitely authentic. Furthermore, their might was endless, containing supreme profound secrets. Hence, their desire to obtain the remaining 6 parts of the 9 transformations divine scroll became even more intense. However, it was not everyone that would be this impulsive. Could the words spoken by Desolate Moon really be trusted? What if he actually had hold of the complete 9 transformations divine scroll, yet had given them false information so that they would put their lives on the line and work for him? But if Desolate Moon really possessed the complete 9 transformations divine scroll, yet was still scheming for what lay within the ancient tomb, that meant that the object that was hidden within was incredibly precious. At the very least, it would not be inferior in value to the 9 transformations divine scroll. Otherwise, what need was there to use a heavenly venerable tier technique as a recruitment tactic? Everyone held their own individual thoughts, but they reached an agreement on one matter, and that was that they definitely had to raise this swamp to the ground. The great celestial kings all worked together. They were all 9th Heaven Celestial Kings. Otherwise, even 8th Heaven Celestial Kings were not qualified to participate. This swamp was extremely terrifying, and the black chi wafting from it possessed frighteningly deadly might. Even 9th Heaven Celestial Kings would have to resist it with their full effort. The highest tier regulation of poison. Linghan came to this conclusion after surveying it for a few days. The highest tier of regulations was the 9th Heaven Celestial King tier, and only 9th Heaven Celestial Kings would be able to match this level. Moreover, a streak of black chi from this place was equivalent to a single 9th Heaven Celestial King that cultivated the regulation of poison. Just the thought of that was frightening enough. It could only be swept aside bit by bit through the combined efforts of countless 9th Heaven Celestial Kings. Their progress was exceedingly slow because their enemy was too strong. The news spread out, and even more 9th Heaven Celestial Kings arrived. Desolate Moon was not miserly at all. In any case, the 3 parts of the 9 transformations divine scroll had already been taught to so many people. Any 9th Heaven Celestial King who came would be allowed to learn. 1 year, 10 years, 100 years. The Celestial Kings were all forging onwards steadily. After all, they were true 9th Heaven Celestial Kings, so how could they be deterred by poisonous chi that was born in nature? However, looking down from above, there was still no sign of boundaries for the swamp. Who knew how many more hundreds, thousands, or even millions of years it would need before it could finally be eradicated? Thankfully, the one thing that Celestial Kings did not lack was time. They had no fear of Immortals' tribulation. As long as they were not killed by other elites, their lifespan was unlimited. Ling Han would also go to the swamp and extract a streak of poisonous chi to temper himself. It almost resulted in his death every time. In the most serious case, his whole body even rotted, and he nearly just died like that. This was a battle with a 9th Heaven Celestial King. Even if it was just a sliver or a streak, it was extremely terrifying. He could be easily killed. This was absolutely playing with fire. But the effects were astonishing. The constant battle with 9th Heaven Celestial King tier regulations caused his cultivation level to improve by leaps and bounds as he rapidly and steadily advanced towards the peak stage of the 4th heaven. 10,000 years, 100,000 years, 1,000,000 years. Time passed very quickly, but the swamp was still there, as if there was no end to it. Just how long would they have to continue doing this? You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories,